Okay, so today's class, we're speaking about all the great mitzvahs that come at the end of life. Already we did like about 10 mitzvahs involved, and today we're going to speak about the mitzvah of comforting each other in our challenging times, which that mitzvah starts at the end of life by the funeral, where we need to comfort the mourners. At the very end of the funeral, they create two lines of people, and the mourners pass in between, and everyone that is there offers the mourners the prayer of condolences. That starts the period of Shiva, of 7 days of comforting, and the family goes home, and they at home they sit Shiva, and people come to visit them, and they offer them comfort. Now, the main line that we're taught by our sages that needs to be said to the mourners is a line with a few words. It's Hamakom Yenachem Etchem Betoch Shar Avilei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. 8 words. 8 words that we're supposed to say to the mourners. May God comfort you amongst the other mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. And I'm going to pose a very difficult question, a very challenging question on this particular prayer. This is the prayer that we're taught to say to the mourners. But the prayer sounds a little bit out of place. How's that? You know, could you imagine someone walks into a Shiva house and comes over to the mourner and says to the mourner, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear your mother passed away. Oh, very, very sad. What did she pass away from? When she passed away, she had cancer. What kind of cancer? Cancer of the throat. Oh, my uncle also had that same cancer, that terrible cancer. It's terrible. My uncle also died sadly a few weeks ago from the same cancer." Now, are you making the mourner feel better, or you're just making them feel worse? Not only did their mother die, but your uncle also died. So you're making them happier. Here comes the more important thing. Should you be bringing your headaches or your sorrow, your tzaras in focus when you should be focusing, trying to help the mourner, not telling them that, you're almost like belittling their suffering. You're saying, not only are you suffering, I'm also suffering. Now listen carefully to the prayer we say to the mourners. Hamakom Yenachem Etchem, may God comfort you. Shar Avilei Tzion V'Yerushalayim, amongst the other mourners of Zion, Jerusalem. What does it mean? Those mourners, who are the mourners of Zion, Jerusalem? We are all the mourners of Zion, Jerusalem. The Beit HaMikdash, Jerusalem, was destroyed, over 2,000 years ago. Until this day, we are mourning the fact that we don't have a temple in Jerusalem. We are mourning that there's no peace in Israel. We are mourning that there is no complete peace in Israel. So we tell the mourner, you're mourning for your loss. You just lost your father, your mother, your sister, your spouse, your child. You should know, may God comfort you amongst the other mourners of Zion, Jerusalem, amongst all of us who are also mourners. So basically, we're telling the mourner that we're suffering too. Like I said, that sounds a little bit strange. Why would we bring in the suffering of all of the Jewish people when you should be focusing on the suffering of the mourner? It's rude. First of all, you're hurting them more. Not only are they suffering now for the loss of their loved one, you're telling them that there's other reasons to suffer too. Crying out for Jerusalem too. And the second thing, which is the most important problem, is why would we change the focus? We understand, Hamakam Yenachem Etchem, may God comfort you. But why bring in the Jerusalem over here? Why bring in other tzaras and take away the focus from the parent that this person is mourning for? You get my question? So the prayer seems to be a little bit insensitive and unfocused. I have an answer. This is just a question. This is just a question. So please don't shut your video now or you'll go off the Zoom, because then you'll have a hard question without an answer. So stay tuned for the answer. Okay. So what is the answer? The answer, I'll tell you the answer. The answer is, why do we mention Jerusalem? You know, this is actually, there was a story of the famous Jewish general. His name was Ariel Sharon. Talking about wars now, Ariel Sharon fought in all the major wars of Israel. He was Israel's most decorated general. Besides for that, he also became later prime minister of Israel. But when this story happened, it was 1967. Ariel Sharon just came back from a great victory of the Six-Day War. Israel was one of the greatest victories ever, and all the Israelis were very proud. The Jews around the world were very proud. And Ariel Sharon was the famous general. And he came to the Western Wall because he was out in the Sinai, I believe. So that's usually where he was. That was his specialty, was the Sinai region. And he came back to Jerusalem, which they had already reconquered. And as we know, Jerusalem in 1948, the Jordanians came in Jerusalem and they occupied Jerusalem till 1967, till the Six-Day War broke out. And as part of the Six-Day War, Israel reinstated its ownership over Jerusalem. And so Ariel Sharon thought, he's going to rush first thing. When he came back from the war, he said, "I'll go to Jerusalem, go Jerusalem, the Western Wall." Everybody knows about the Western Wall, the ancient remnant of the Holy Temple, the holiest place in the world. We have one little wall left from that time. When the Romans flattened Jerusalem and destroyed the temple, they left one wall, an outer wall, the outer Western Wall, which was the remnant, like the little bit that they couldn't destroy. To me, the Western Wall is always very significant. The Western Wall is like it's like the part that the enemy can't destroy. Like with the Jewish people, they always try destroying us. There's always something that remains. Always the Jewish people, they can't destroy us. We're the eternal people. So there's always something. That's the Western Wall is symbolic of that. It's a wall without a building, without anything. There's nothing there. Now there's a beautiful, Western Wall plaza. That's a plaza. There's no building there. The wall reminds us of the Netzach Yisrael lo yishaker, that the eternity of Israel will never be destroyed. Okay, so Ariel Sharon arrives there, and like the famous joke goes, when the first astronaut came to Mars, he saw already Chabad was there already on Mars. They were already there, asking him, the astronaut, whether they put on tefillin yet. So when Ariel Sharon arrived at the Western Wall, there was already a tefillin stand there. Like they had a tefillin stand there with tefillin at the wall. And the rabbi that was there, the Chabad rabbi that was there, beat the general to the Western Wall. He asked him, he said, it's a special moment you hear at the Beit HaMikdash, at the holiest place of the world. Maybe you want to put on tefillin. So Ariel Sharon, he's a very traditional guy, very traditional man, and he loved Judaism, and he said, "Sure, betach, for sure, I'll put on tefillin." And he put on tefillin. And in that little period of time, he got fairly close to this rabbi that put him on the tefillin, and he kept a little bit of a kesher, a little connection with him thereafter. It's Chabadnik. And but unfortunately, a few months later, there was a terrible tragedy in Sharon's family. It was Rosh Hashanah, and the family was eating a festive Rosh Hashanah meal. And like it's in all homes, while the meal goes on, the adults stay inside, and the kids, Sharon had guests and other kids, and his son was a boy named Gur Sharon. He had I think it was his oldest son, maybe. And he was like 11 years old. And he went out with his friends, and they went to play in the backyard. And they went to play, and the Sharon had a big farm. That's they lived. They lived in the Negev in a big farm, and there was in the backyard. There was like a barn there, barn for animals and stuff. Sharon, you also used to use it as a place where people go play and do things. He kept some of his guns there. And while they're eating the meal, they suddenly hit a gunshot. And Sharon knew suddenly something was wrong. And he jumped out of it, darted out of his seat, darted out, and he ran to the back to the barn, and he gives a look inside, and he sees the kids were playing with the guns, and one of the kids accidentally shot his son, and the apple of his eye. He gives a look, he sees his son on the floor, wounded. So of course he's a general. He went right into action. He grabbed the son, he ran, and he hopped a ride on the way to the hospital. Unfortunately, his son died a few hours later in his arms on the way to the hospital. Less than an hour later. And Sharon was totally broken. At the funeral, if the Yontif buried his son, and then he sat Shiva, and he was inconsolable. It was like so inconsolable. After what he did, after this great victory of Six-Day War and all of that, he felt on top of the world. Now he felt like a piece of nothing, losing his son, 11-year-old boy. I can't imagine what that feels like. And different dignitaries and people came to try to comfort him. It was a very hard thing to comfort when you lose a child, especially a child, 11-year-old boy. And the Chabadnik, the guy that put on tefillin with him, he came to visit him in his shiva. And Sharon told him, he says, "What can you say to comfort me?" He says, I'm just a regular rabbi, regular chassid, but I have a rabbi. He's my rabbi. He's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the Rebbe has deep insight into life. Maybe he can comfort you. So I'll let the Rebbe know about this. And so the next day, there was a letter that arrived from the Rebbe to Sharon. And in the letter, the Rebbe tackles actually this question that I posed right at the beginning. He tackles precisely that. He speaks about to Sharon in the letter about comforts him for his child. And in the letter, he asks that question: why are we mentioning Jerusalem in the middle of this prayer? It's supposed to be comforting the mourner. Why are we distracting to another time, to another place, to another situation? And the Rebbe said, it's not that we're trying to distract. We're trying to focus even more. He says, because Jerusalem it really gives us deep insight into what life is, what the afterlife is. And Jerusalem gives great comfort to the mourner. We tell the mourner about Jerusalem, and we make the comparison of their loss to the loss of Jerusalem because it's very similar. The Rebbe says in 3 ways. First of all, just like in Jerusalem was destroyed, but we always said, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. We never lost hope of reuniting with our Jerusalem and coming back to Israel, and against all odds, the Jews did come back to Jerusalem. So we tell the mourner, yes, right now it's very tragic, and you feel like you'll never again see your child, but the Jewish belief is that you will, one way or another, be reunited again in soul, and spirit, and body. As Jews, we also believe in the revival of the dead. So just like Jerusalem was destroyed physically, but Jews always never lost hope that we'll be back in Jerusalem again. And that hope is ultimately what brought us back and continues to bring us back. Second point is that Jerusalem wasn't a personal loss of one person. It really belonged to everyone and belonged to the story of the Jewish people. So too, the person that you lost, your loved one, is not an individual, but he really belongs to everyone, belongs to the community. Every Jew really is part of a continuous story of thousands of years that keeps on unfolding. And every person is an indispensable part of that story of the Jewish people, which still continues to this very day. And likewise, your loss is not a personal loss, but also a communal loss. It's a loss of everybody, of Klal Yisrael, and part of the story of the Jewish people. And the third point is, just like Jerusalem, they broke Jerusalem physically, but spiritually it lived on. The spirit of the Jewish people continued even after the building was broken. So too, when you lose a loved one, their body is buried, but their soul lives on. And the soul is continuing forever and ever. So like Jerusalem, so there's the 3 points over here, which I'm going to elaborate on a little bit more. One point is that we return back to Jerusalem, and likewise we reunite. Second point was that no person is just like Jerusalem is not a personal place. It belongs, it's part of the story of our people. So too, every single Jew that passes away really is part of a greater story, of an unfolding story. And that story still continues. And the third point is that the soul continues, just like the soul of Jerusalem was never destroyed. We were never robbed of that. So too, the soul of a loved one continues to live on. So there's 3 nukudot, 3 points over here in this that come from that comparison to Jerusalem. But I'll start backwards, and I'm going to tell you first about the first point, that there's no death on the soul level, and that just from experience is quite a comforting point. When you know that the soul is still somewhere, and the soul is okay in that place, for a parent or for any mourner, that's a great source of comfort to know that they are still there, they are alive, they are still, it's not the end. They are somewhere and they're well and they're doing well. You know, I know someone once wrote to the Rebbe about that they lost a child. The Rebbe comforted the person and said, you know, look, told the Rebbe said, like, how would you feel if you know your child is still somewhere, still living somewhere else, just went to another country, and but your child is well, and your child is thinking about you, and you can continue thinking about your child, and every once in a while even you can send packages to your child in this other place. That is, would you feel a little bit more comforted? The person said, yes, I feel a little more comforted. The Rebbe said, well, that's the case. Your child really is in another space. They're there, and they're good, and they're happy, in the happiest place. And you could send, by doing mitzvahs for them, doing good deeds, you can send like care packages to them. That's the care packages that can be sent to them. Because we believe, like we say many times on this class, we've said that we know that there's an ecosystem in the world. Everything goes back to its source. The body, which we know that God created Adam's body from the dust of the earth. So the body goes dust to dust, turns back to the earth. But the soul, where does the soul come from? The soul is a piece of God. And piece of God is indestructible. And so that piece of God also continues back to where it came from. The soul came from God and it returns to God. So this way we know that the soul is very much alive. And the second point, which is very important, is that we will be reunited once again. And that is an important point, that we know that the soul lives on. And after 120, when we go, we will see the soul again. It's there. It's there in heaven. And we know that when we go to heaven, we will be able to reunite with the soul. And even here in this world, there's also ways to reunite with the soul. We've given a lot of this stuff in some of the previous classes, I think. So I'm not going to go to the great length, but you know, you can look up some of the old classes and check that out. And that was the second point. And the third point is that every soul is a continuous story. It's like we're part of the Jewish people, part of a bigger picture. And for instance, you know, you have the concept that every Jew is every Jew has like a little letter of the Sefer Torah that's theirs. And we're all part of a greater body of souls. So we're all the souls of the Jewish people, like one great soul. And it's almost like many times they give the example of it being like a Sefer Torah. The Torah scroll has many letters. And every Jew is like another letter in the Torah. And just like a Torah, if one letter is missing, the whole Torah becomes not kosher. So too, every Jew is an essential part of this great scroll of Torahs of the Jewish people. And that letter of the Torah is who we are. That's our personality. That's our being. But we always have to realize that we're part of a greater picture that unfolds. There was a story once of a rabbi that was an emissary of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he was going from city to city, and the Rebbe sent him to this one city. It's in Chicago. It was the Rebbe was then in New York, sent him to Chicago, and told him to go there and to look up a certain Jew who had roots in the Lubavitch community, but over the years after the war, he wasn't involved anymore, and he became very removed from the Jewish community. The Rebbe said, "Go and check out this Yid. He's a wealthy Jew in Chicago. Go." So he went to his office, and the rabbi's name was I think it was Rabbi Weinberg. Or Rabbi, it was Rabbi Weinberg. And he went to this Jew who was then in Chicago, and he came to him, and the guy says, "Okay, Rabbi, you want a check? I'll write you out a check." You know, when rabbis walk into the office, usually you think that they're coming for money. So he says, no, I'm not coming for money. I mean, if you want to give some money for the yeshiva, it's fine, but I'm just coming to see how you're doing, and to check up on you, on your Yiddishkeit, and to see you. He says, "Well, come on. What's is that your job?" He said, "Let me explain to you." He says, in the olden days, you know, in the small shtetls, they all used to have, in every shul there was a few Torahs. And from time to time, the Torahs got old, and some of the letters started to crack. So there was a fellow who was known as the Traveling Scribe. He used to go from city to city, and he used to go check up on the Torahs. You know? So if one of the small shtetls, if one of the Torahs, one of the cracked letters were cracked, something, the rabbi would open up the Torah, he would come, the sofer, he would come and he would take out his ink, he would fill in the ink and fix the Torah. And that way, all the Torahs in Europe were kept in tip-top shape. That's what his job was, the traveling scribes. He says, that's what I'm doing, he said. He said, I'm like a traveling scribe, the rabbi said. The Rebbe sent me to go to the communities to see every single Jew, because every Jew is like a letter in the Torah. But sometimes the letters of the Torah are a little bit scratched. So my job is to come and to fill in the little ink that might be missing in your soul and to fix you up and to make you complete. So the fellow said, well, very nice, Rabbi. It's a great idea. I like that. I like the concept. And he wrote him out a nice check anyways, and he sent him home. I came back, this rabbi came back to the Rebbe, and he sat down in front of the Rebbe. The Rebbe asked him, how was your trip? How was your journey? And by the way, did you go visit Mr. Finkelstein from Chicago? You went to visit? I said, yeah. He says, Rebbe, I want to tell you what I told him. You're going to like this. You're going to love what I told him. The fellow asked, why am I here? So I said, I'm like the traveling scribe. And I explained to him the whole idea in the olden days about the scribe used to come and used to fill in the letters of the Torah. So the Rebbe's face turned white, like a ghost. And you could see he was like angry. The Rebbe says, that's what you told him? He said, yeah, isn't that a good thing to tell? The Rebbe says, no. The Rebbe said, no letter, no Jewish soul can be broken. You can't crack a letter of your soul. Every Jew is perfect. There's no such things as letters of individual Torah, of the individual person, of their letter of the Torah being, it's not the Rebbe said, what should I have told him? The Rebbe said, you should have said that every Jew has his letter etched, not like a Torah, but like the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, it was etched in stone. So you should have said to him that your job is to come check out on the letters. You know? Sometimes, like in the cemetery, you go, sometimes it's etched in stone. Sometimes over time, there's some fungus or something, or some dust that gets caught in some dirt that's collected in the letters. So your job is to come to wash it out or to blow away the dust. But the letter always stays intact, the Rebbe said. Don't you forget that. No Jewish letter ever falls apart. Always in place. Sometimes it gets a little dirty. Life gets a little fungus, a little this. Your job is to wash it out, to clean it out, to blow away the dust, and to restore the letter the way it was before. But the letter itself was never damaged. It was always in place. Interesting concept. And this is the concept that we all have within ourselves. We have letters of the Torah, and every soul is another letter. And the letter is never destroyed. It always remains an integral part of the Jewish people. So even when a soul goes away, it's still part of the big picture. And it continues from generation to generation. The soul of one generation continues to the soul of the other generation. So part of a bigger picture. So this is how the Rebbe comforted Ariel Sharon, and he said to him that the prayer that's in the Siddur, the one that we say to the mourners, may God comfort you. May God comfort you amongst the others mourners in Jerusalem. We're not distracting the mourner. We're not speaking about something. We're comforting them more. We're telling them, your loved one is like Jerusalem. Like Jerusalem, we always have the hope of seeing again. You will see your loved one again. Like Jerusalem, that they only destroyed the body, the spiritual zone. Like Jerusalem, that never was a personal thing. It belonged to the whole story of the Jewish people, the unfolding story of the Jewish people. Your loved one, their story hasn't finished. It's still continuing. And they're part of something greater. So these are three powerful points of comfort that you can offer the mourner. So that's the origins and the understanding of Hamachi Menachem Es Museh Shavel Tzim Yerushalayim. So this was the Rebbe actually continued to be close to Ariel Sharon all the years. And one of my favorite stories was when Ariel Sharon came to see the Rebbe, And he came to the Rebbe, he said, Lubavitcher Rebbe, he says to him, he says, you are a general of the spiritual general of the Jewish people. He says, a Jewish general always goes in front of their army, not behind the army. The Jewish general always, like King David, always went in front of his soldiers, didn't hide behind them. So if you're a general of the Jewish people, he said to the Rebbe, why don't you come to Israel? You should be leading the Jewish people to Israel. So Lubavitcher Rebbe, he never got stuck in these situations. He always had a good answer. So he said, Ariel, he says, Arik, he says, your specialty is in the army. He says, my specialty is in the Navy. He says to him, the Rebbe was a naval engineer. The Rebbe studied in the Sorbonne, became an engineer in the Navy. He worked for many years in the Navy Yard as an engineer in New York, actually, before he became Rebbe. So he says, my specialty, the Rebbe says, is the Navy. He says, in the Navy, we know that a captain is the last one to leave a sinking ship. He says, I have my ship over here in America, American Jewry, North American Jewry. The ship is like, sinking a little bit, there's all the assimilation. He says, my job here is to take care of the ship, and I'll be the last one to leave the ship of America. So that's, so he says, yes, the generals have to go in front of their army, but captains of the Navy, we know to stay, take care of our ships, and that's my job, is to take care of the Jews in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel. So I just it's a good story to share with you, but regardless, the points the Rebbe made was there's three powerful points. Don't forget it. Of Hamakim Yenachem Eskim, the God should comfort you like Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was never just a physical thing. It's the heart of the Jewish people. It's the soul of the Jewish people. And whatever happens in Jerusalem happens to each and every individual Jew, which we pass on that story and that theme from generation to generation. Okay, so if anybody has any questions on what we spoke about, you're welcome to ask. Not, I wish you just a good Shabbos, but if you want to ask, go for it. Anybody?
Thank you, Rabbi. Very interesting. Have a good Shabbos.
Have a great Shabbos, Eddie. We should see peace in the whole world.
Rabbi, thank you. Thank you so much.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
What do you got there?
Such a wonderful class.
Who's that young rabbi there? Yeah, those are the olden days. Today it's this. I'm gonna look to see who the guy is. I don't recognize. Good Shabbos to everybody. Have a great one.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Bye bye.
Good Shabbos.